Ladies and gentlemen, the next briefing for today is weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. And now I give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hoch, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine.
Good afternoon. In the past week, little has changed in eastern Ukraine. It's been the same story, the same incessant litany of acts of violence, tit-for-tat violence that has been a future of life and death along the contact line for far too long. Over 6,000 ceasefire violations, every one of them a broken promise, every bullet or bomb a display of contempt for agreements made to cease fire. That contempt was particularly evident in the Mariupol sector last week. On Tuesday evening last week, 22nd of May, our monitoring officers in the city listened for 45 minutes as about 400 artillery rounds exploded in the distance to the northeast. A frenzy of violence unfolding in and around once peaceful villages and settlements. It was a similar story in and around the Donetsk filtration station. In addition to the commitments made to cease fire in general, the sides have given specific assurances not to fire within the wider Donetsk filtration station area. What they call security guarantees essentially promises to stop firing within a 15-kilometer zone around the facility. But they have not stopped firing. Every day and night, bullets and bombs fly in the air around the filtration station, endangering the civilian workers operating the plant and the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission civilian monitoring officers facilitating their access and work. We in fact recorded around 500 ceasefire violations in that area last week. Proof demonstrated 500 times that the security guarantees the sites provide are not worth the paper they are written on. Those who write them know this, and yet, like so many other promises, they continue to make these promises to cease firing, and the firing continues. With the stakes so high, with people's life on the line, they continue to play their games. But no one is laughing. To be taken seriously, one needs to act seriously, with responsibility and integrity, with deeds that match words, not with empty promises that at this point, after so many failures, mean nothing. Promises that are taken seriously by no one anymore. Dear friends, the Donetsk filtration station has been the focus of much attention. Rightly so, over 300,000 people on both sides of the contact line depend on it for drinking water. But let's be clear, the situation around the plant is nothing unusual in the current Donbass context. The same armed standoff with civilians caught in the middle is happening all along the almost 500-kilometer long contact line. In places that have sadly, over the past 4 years, become a byword for violence and intransigence. Places like Chorlivka, Svetlodarsk, Avdiivka, Marinka, Yasinovata, Troitske, Zaitsev, Shovanka, Debaltseve, Toretsk, Olenivka, Dokuchayevsk, Stila, Talakivka, Petrivske, Vesela Hora, Kamjanka, Kruta Balka, Majorsk, Oktyabr, Pishevik, Sachanka, Solote, Molodishne, Katrinivka, Bezerivske, Novoluhanske, Popasna, Holmivske, Veslehorivka, Malomikolivka, Lepetinske. Places like Shastia, once associated with happiness, but now with tragedy and loss. From the Azov Sea all the way to Stanica Luhanska, ordinary men, women and children are getting killed and injured. Dear friends, today is in fact Children's Day in Ukraine. A day when we are reminded that the very young need protection. That children need a childhood. Last week, however, was instead a grim reminder that children in eastern Ukraine, instead of protection, are endangered, traumatized, often injured, and even killed. This conflict had many tragedies. Our monitoring officers have called on many times to monitor and report on the unspeakable acts of violence involving the death and mutilation of civilians. Last year, in fact, they recorded the death of 87 civilians and the injury of 399. This year, the number stands at 28 civilians killed and 86 injured, with many more cases still pending verification. Hundreds of innocent men, women, and children. It is the death and injury of children that has been the hardest to accept. Often children who have never seen a day of peace, killed in a conflict that started before they were born. In 2017, the OSCE SMM confirmed at least 3 children were killed and 39 injured. So far this year, we have recorded 2 children killed and 10 injured. Just last week in Donetsk, a 13-year-old boy and his father were killed, and an 18-year-old boy and his mother were injured due to shelling. In Horlivka, 2 boys, aged 10 and 11, were admitted to hospital with shrapnel injuries. Our monitors also confirmed that the 14-year-old boy was killed and 3 other teenagers injured when a device exploded inside a bus in Debaltseve. More broken lives because of broken promises. And the number keeps growing. This week, we have more reports of children paying the price for adult intransigence. More young lives taken, somebody's child like yours or mine. In today's daily report, soon to be published on the OSCE website, we have confirmation of the death of a 15-year-old girl, killed in Zalizne on Monday this week when a mortar round exploded. My heartfelt sympathy goes to her family, and indeed to all the other affected grieving families for their personal loss. Dear friends, these children were killed or injured because someone fired weapons that should have been withdrawn to distances beyond firing range. Or they were killed because demining has not taken place. At a deeper level, however, they were killed and injured because the sides have refused to disengage from one another. They have refused to move positions to a point where they would at least be out of small arms firing range of one another. With sometimes only 50 meters separating the sides, it is usually the exchange of small arms fire that results in escalation, with one angry shot being met with a burst of machine gun fire, followed by a mortar round, leading eventually to a frenzy of violence in which multiple launch rocket systems are being deployed. Proximity allows to spark, to ignite the bushfire that spreads up and down the contact line. The sides recognize this correlation between proximity and escalation. We indeed have documented it many times over the past 4 years in places like Debaltseve, Pikuzi, or between Avdiivka and Yasinovata. Because of the risks, the sides promised to disengage forces and formations from Stanica Luhanska, Solote and Petrivske. Pilot cases that were meant to lead to disengagement all along the contact line. In Petriske and Solote there was some compliance. In the past few weeks, however, we have seen a reversal of whatever progress has been made in those areas. In all the 3 disengagement areas, we have seen on a daily basis personnel and hardware. It is not unsurprisingly the ceasefire violations follow. Last week, in the Petriske disengagement area, we recorded 117 ceasefire violations, 34 in Solote and 1 in Stanica Luhanska. More promises made, more promises broken, and it gets worse. Instead of disengagement, we have now confirmed that there is actual movement forward into the Chihari neighborhood of Biftene and in the Sholobok and Vodiana areas. Engagement instead of disengagement. Perhaps one of the main reasons why children's lives, and indeed the lives of all civilians, are endangered is because societies insist of positioning weapons in and around residential areas, effectively turning civilians into targets. Dear friends, it's almost 4 years now since the first promises were made, 4 years since the sides promised to stop the violence. Promises made to people in Ukraine, in particular to those living in the east of the country. Promises signed on the dotted line, promises to withdraw weapons, disengage forces and formations, demine and cease fire. Broken promises, ultimately promises to stop killing and injuring innocent civilians, promises that would be 0 civilian casualties. 0. Instead of 0, there were 35 civilian casualties in May alone, 10 killed, 25 injured. 10 killed, 25 injured. 35 people in just 1 month, whose lives have been taken, irrevocably damaged otherwise. Those responsible, those who made promises, need to ponder these figures. 35 as opposed to 0 civilian casualties. It's the difference between fact and fiction, the difference between words and deeds, between promises made and promises kept, and for many people, the difference between life and death. This must change. We know it can change. On numerous occasions, when ordered to cease fire, men in uniform have largely complied. For short periods, Christmas, Easter, back to school, the guns have gone almost silent. Children were given their childhood, if only for a short period. Many of us have children. What we all want is the best for them. Today, on Children's Day, the very least we can expect is the right to life and limb for these children. At the minimum, those deciding on issues of life and death, no matter where they are, must ensure children and indeed all civilians are safe. This requires more than words. It requires deeds, implementation of agreements, fulfillment of promises, 0 civilian casualties. Only then we can truly hope for and celebrate a happy Children's Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them.
Crimean News Agency. I would like just to clarify whether the SMM still continues monitoring the situation. Uncom mine, the situation around the Uncom, I mean the flooding that was reported 2 months ago, and what is happening right now, what are current developments, because your recent daily reports do not reflect any observations around this mine.
Thank you. As you know, the flooding would happen and occur, if it does, below surface, so out of sight. the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission will observe, and should it see any changes in the area, it would report about it. We continue to be in touch with all involved in this specific matter, and any findings that we have, we will publish on our website.
Чи є ще запитання?
Do we have more questions?
Questions? Thank you.